Hello everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kevin Jones. I'm the Head of Workforce Development and Training at the National Youth Agency. Today, we're going to update you on the work that's been taking place since the publication of our Pathways to Practice report into the findings of the sector consultation we conducted on the reform of the qualification framework. I'm joined by Paul Fenton, Senior Associate for Workforce Transformation here at the NYA. Paul?
Thank you. Yeah, welcome everybody. It's really good to have people here today. We ran this session earlier in the week as well, and we had a larger group on that occasion. So we kept the session to a more sort of formal basis, so that and everybody asked questions at the end. We're going to do a similar thing today, but we're a smaller group, so really welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat so we know who's with us. And as we go through the session, if you want to post questions as well, we have got a Q&A function, if you're familiar with that with Zoom. If not, if you go to the bottom of your screen and you click on more, you'll see Q&A comes up. If you click on that, that'll bring up a little box where you can register any questions during the session as well. That gives everybody an opportunity to ask questions as we go through, but also when we get to the end, we can sift through those for those who would prefer not to speak on screen. But there'll be an opportunity to speak on screen and ask questions at the end as well. So we're really happy to do that. I'll just give a little bit of background to this as a session and what we're about in terms of what we've described as being strengthening the youth workforce, the youth sector workforce. And as you know, the NYA is committed to a set of ambitions to transform the youth sector workforce. And this ambition is gladly embedded within the theme for Youth Work Week, which we've been celebrating around building brighter futures, where it talks about the importance of trusted support. As the national body for youth work in England, the National Youth Agency exists to champion the value of youth work for all young people, but for local communities and for society more broadly. The NYA is ambitious for youth work and young people, and its vision is a society where every young person can access great youth work. Youth Work Week is shining a light on this trusted support as we build brighter futures with and for young people. And we know that great youth work is only possible through the hard work, dedication, and commitment of the thousands of trusted adults that make up the youth sector workforce, and youth workers in particular. The NYA mission is to grow and strengthen this workforce so that all young people have access, quite specifically, to trained and qualified youth workers wherever and whenever they need to. As Kev was referring to, between December last year and May this year, the NYA took a bold step towards these ambitions when it consulted with the sector on the training and qualifications needed to equip the workforce, resulting in the publication of Pathways to Practice, a report on the future of youth work qualifications. This sets out the pathway for refreshing the youth work qualifications to provide flexible, accessible, and affordable routes up to professional status in youth work. However, to strengthen the youth sector workforce, we also recognise the importance of building the capacity, competence, and confidence in the workforce. And as you will see today, we're calling for the resourcing of more youth workers who are better equipped and given greater professional recognition. So today's briefing provides an update on the NYA's thinking and progress. It sets out the ambition to increase the number of workers appropriately trained and qualified to deliver youth work, the steps required to secure workforce stability, and the work being undertaken to refresh the suite of qualifications that will equip the youth sector workforce to provide great youth work. Kev, as Head of Workforce, is going to take us through progress to date, what we understand is already taking place in the sector, and what we hope to move towards over the next few years into the next decade. As I say, do please note any questions as you go through, but otherwise I'll hand over to Kev to take us through the presentation as is.
Thanks, Paul. So I wanted to remind everyone where we are in terms of the sort of youth workforce ecosystem. So in the workforce, as far as we know, and this is the product of census data and workforce survey data, so it's the best we've got at the moment, and it's only getting more accurate. We have 21,150 paid youth workers. and 14,350 volunteer youth workers. So that's a total workforce of somewhere in the region of 35,500. Of those, um, we've got 4,350 youth workers who are qualified to level 6 or above, so professional youth worker level. Excuse me, and 4,200 who are qualified to level 2 or 3. So 60% of the workforce are unqualified. One of the things that in doing this work we wanted to do was to um, recognise that's the case and celebrate it. It's the mix of staff in the workforce, and in the youth work workforce, and the mix of qualification level is something that's always been the case. But we wanted to make a point of saying that those workers who aren't necessarily professionally qualified or aren't qualified to level 3 are a vital part of the youth work ecosystem. And so, in looking at the qualification review, we have taken into account of that and the fact that those workers are going forward to be a functioning part of the youth workforce. So we wanted to look at the whole workforce rather than just the workers with qualifications. The other thing I wanted to say that's been a significant change over the past 15 years is that the youth work is now delivered differently and through different agencies. Two-thirds of the work being delivered is now being delivered by the voluntary and community sector, which in terms of workforce is quite important in that the contracts and terms and conditions that the voluntary and community sector offer can often be different to those offered by local authorities. And obviously, this has an effect on the shape of the workforce and what the workforce looks like. So, looking at what the workforce looks like, um, here you can see that the vast majority of the workers in the sector have no qualifications. So this grey bar over on the right is the unqualified workforce. 12% have a level 6 and 12% have a level 3. Now, as part of this work, we want to raise the level of training and qualification across the whole workforce, ensuring that everyone in youth work has some level of training and that we have more workers progressing to the higher levels of qualification at level 6 and level 7. So we want to flatten this out a little if we can. The planned new standard qualification framework will be key to it, but it isn't all we need to grow and strengthen the workforce as much as we would like. So here's a reminder of the results of our consultation into qualification reform. So 72% of the people we consulted with, and it was a wide consultation across all sort of sections of the sector, support reforming the qualification framework. There was strong backing for progression pathways from level 1 up to level 6 plus. There was a strong call out for increased accessibility for underrepresented groups. I wanted to talk about that a little bit because one of the things that we should be proud of, but also requires a little bit of scrutiny and sort of self-examination really, is in terms of recruitment onto training courses, youth work is one of the most diverse um, sets of students and sets of learners across the education system. We do really well recruiting a diverse group of students into training. That doesn't necessarily translate into progression through the workforce. And so that's an interesting thing for us to bear in mind and probably need some work in the future. But we do very well on accessibility for underrepresented groups into training. The final part that was shouted loud and clear as part of the consultation was people were keen to retain level 6 plus, level 6 and 7 as kind of the gold standard for professional status for youth work. And we agree with that. We think that's absolutely right. So, Pathways to Practice came up with a number of recommendations. So these were to build a cohesive framework from level 1 to 6. So that's a framework that sort of hangs together, there's progression through, that people can jump into and jump out of, and still know that they're part of one framework from level 1 to 6. The recommendation was to promote level 6 as the professional benchmark, and that's what we're doing. It was important to ensure inclusive and affordable routes to qualification. I want to illustrate that a little bit more. The routes into qualification that we have at the moment, it's perfectly clear that the funded routes are the ones that learners enrol upon. So the apprenticeship is doing reasonably well. Self-funded degrees aren't doing quite as well. And on the level 3 training, most of the training that we deliver is bursary or apprenticeship. So funded training does really, really well. Very, very, very few people, all local authorities, pay for training themselves. So the funded routes is really important, and I'm going to talk about that a little more later. Excuse me. Next recommendation was people wanted to, well, we want, and people wanted us to strengthen recognition of prior learning and prior experience. One of the things that's true in the youth work sector is in that huge cohort of people who are unqualified are a load of people who have been working in the sector for an awfully long time, or they have qualifications in related sectors. And for whatever reason, they haven't got round to doing actual youth work training. Um, and sometimes now are kind of either have done their education and done their learning and don't want to go back into learning um, to do a full degree and that sort of thing, or they've been working for 20 odd years and it's in their eyes too late. We want to recognise that bit of the workforce and we want to value their experience. And so strengthening the recognition of prior learning and allowing people to use that as an entry into qualifications at an appropriate level is something that we're trying to do. It's not as straightforward as you'd think, but it is something that's at the forefront of our mind when we're developing the new qualifications levels 4, 5, and looking at how people can progress through the pathway. And the final recommendation was to advocate for policy support and funding. So as I said, funding for qualifications is incredibly important. So everything that we're doing at the moment in terms of developing new qualifications is with an eye on what government funding is available outside of bursary. So we're looking at funded pathways through to level 3. We're obviously building on the apprenticeship. And the new government white paper is giving us some indication of where government is going in terms of funding. And so we are building the framework with a view to that. So going forward from pathways to practice, it's clear that reform of the qualification framework isn't sufficient by itself for us to develop the workforce that's needed. We can build the qualifications. As I've said, people don't tend to come into the qualification framework unless it's a funded place and we don't have enough qualified staff. So in addition, changing the qualification framework isn't the answer by itself. In addition to that, youth work needs to be better recognised, valued and funded to make it a more attractive career proposition for staff. And we need to ensure that we have the appropriate training infrastructure to deliver the new framework. So we need people to deliver the training, we need assessors, we need tutors and that sort of thing. So there's a lot more work than just reforming the qualifications. And we've organised our work towards this around the categories of more youth workers who are better equipped and who are professionally recognised, as Paul said. So, going on to where we want to be. More youth workers. NYA has, for the past few years, used these figures, and I'll go through them in a bit more detail, as a guideline for what would be sufficient or a sufficient youth service in England. So sufficient means a service where young people have easy access to a youth worker wherever they are. And what these figures show is that they're based on the idea that we would have one professionally qualified member of staff per 500 young people, and 2 qualified at the lower levels, so 2 qualified below level 6, supported by 20,000 volunteers. That's what we would deem as a sufficient youth service. And as you can see in the graph, that means growth for professionally qualified staff from 4,300 that we have at the moment up to beyond 13,000. And more than the rise in lower qualified staff is astronomical. It's double that of the professionally qualified staff. So, as you may be able to imagine, looking at the rate of growth that's necessary there, As we've gathered more data, it's become clear that from our current starting point and with the levels of recruitment onto current training courses, these levels of provision aren't attainable within the next 10 years. Um, to reach them would require a dramatic statutory intervention and an investment in excess of £1.5 billion. So while we still would deem this as a sufficient youth service, in terms of our targets for growing the youth workforce, we've changed our targets to something which we think is much more attainable and within the bounds of reality. Using our best current data, we've set this as our current 10-year target. Um, so it's essentially it's half of what would be sufficiency. So we would like one professionally qualified member of staff per 1,000 young people, and two qualified to level 3 to level 1 to 5 per 1,000 young people in addition. So that means growing level 6 from 4,300 today to 6,500. And level 3 to 5 from 2,100 to 6,500, and level 1 or 2 from 2,100 to 6,500. Now that's allowing for attrition in the service, so people dropping out of courses and dropping out of the sector. We'd like to raise the number of trained volunteers from, we don't know at the moment, to over 10,000. So to put that into perspective, last year we recruited 261 people onto professionally qualifying courses. So reaching the target that we've outlined here requires that we grow this number incrementally until in year 10 we recruit 822 people onto professionally qualifying courses. So it's quite a jump from 261 to 822. It's going to require a great deal of work. However, there is cause for celebration. Earlier on this week, we got the figures for recruitment onto professionally qualifying courses for this year. And we've recruited 319 people onto professionally qualifying courses. So that's degrees, masters, and the degree apprenticeship. So that's a 20% increase, which is over and above what we projected as necessary to reach our target in 10 years' time. So if we can continue growing at that rate, we will smash it. But as I say, there's no guarantee. But I did want to highlight that because I'm very, very pleased with those figures, and a 20% growth year on year is worth celebrating and worth noting. In addition, I want to reiterate that language is important. So this ambition for growth doesn't change what we see as being sufficient. Sufficiency is still, we would say, one professionally qualified member of staff per 500. This is just what we're able to reach with a great deal of work within the current landscape and without significant government intervention. So I'll show you what it looks like. Just let me move myself from in front of the graph. So over on the left-hand side, on the yellow bar, you can see qualified staff. The shadowy bit is the amount we need to grow by. So it's probably about half as much again. The two bits in the middle are what we need to do in terms of growth for level 3 and, levels 1 through to 5. And the trained volunteers, as I say, at the moment, we're not entirely sure. We don't think volunteers have qualification at all, but we want to make sure that they have basic training at the very least, and possibly training to level 1, 2, 3 or above. It's important to stress with these figures that it's a national picture. So these are the average workers that we're aiming for across the whole nation. And the situation locally varies wildly. Some localities may already be meeting sufficiency or getting close to it, and others might be a great distance away. And the supporting infrastructure, demand for staff, and availability of training may not be in place to support growth. So a regional and local approach for growing the workforce is essential. For example, I mean, I recently went and spoke to the regional youth work unit in the Northwest, and the Northwest is the best served area in the country in terms of demand for staff. They have several large youth services that require professionally qualified staff. There's also a really, really healthy environment in terms of professional training and training at level 3. And if you compare that landscape to, for example, east of England, around Norfolk, it's entirely different. And so our approach must be attendant to the needs and landscape in localities. So that's more youth workers, better equipped. So our aim is to increase the levels of training across the whole workforce. So we want all of those bars in the graph to go upwards. The new standard qualification framework that's in development is designed to support this. So at the moment we have 60% unqualified, 4,200 at level 2 and 3, and 4,300 at professional level. The qualification framework offers a progression through levels 1 to 6, with flexible entry and exit and progression. So you can go from level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can enter at whatever point is appropriate to you. And we're also hoping to design it so that you can exit wherever you feel it is suitable for your circumstances at the time, and then pick up later. So levels 4 and 5 are really important for that. We're also offering or hoping to offer basic training, which is based on our Raising the Bar document, and that talks about sort of offering safeguarding, health and safety, kind of what is youth work. And we would want everybody working in the youth work sector to undertake some form of basic training. And we're also wanting to develop accredited CPD options available to people wherever they are in their career progression and in their training progression. And so some of the work that's being undertaken around that at the moment is, I don't know if you remember, we launched a CPD level 4 certificate a couple of years ago, and there's kind of 30 specialist units in that. My colleague Karen is working very hard to convert that into a sort of micro credential offer, meaning that people can do those units individually and gain credits towards training elsewhere in the framework. The final point to reiterate is that this training needs to be funded wherever possible. So the white paper is very, very clear that the funded options at level 3 are going to be V levels, apprenticeships are going to be funded, higher technical qualifications get talked about an awful lot, so that's where level 4 and 5 would be. And we also want to make sure that within all of these different qualifications and levels, that you can map across. So one of the things that we're looking at is the ability for universities to offer an exit at certificate, higher education certificate and DIP HE level that will map to the level 4 and level 5 qualifications that are in design. So I've got another diagram to show you. This is what it looks like. And again, this is in consultation at the moment with training providers and with ETS. But what we're thinking in terms of the standard qualification framework broadly is this sort of shape. So there are 7 thematic areas that we've identified. These aren't different to the thematic areas that people cover in youth work training at the moment. They're all based on the National Occupational Standards and the QAA benchmarks, that sort of thing. So it's not a huge departure in terms of what youth workers will be learning. We've just organised it slightly differently. So the 7 themes are social justice, evaluation and impact, leadership and management, relational practice, developing youth work practice, and professional responsibility. Plus, running through all of those, reflective practice, which is kind of a way of being for youth work. So that's why we had that one as overarching. So those are the 7 themes. And what we intend is that they will be sort of tackled by learners in greater degrees of sophistication from level 1 through to level 6. So level 1 or level 2, leadership and management, for example, might be about leading activities for young people or leading a group of young people. Whereas level 5, 6, 7 may be more about sort of strategic leadership in amongst a landscape of allied sector providers in a local authority. So the sophistication will increase according to the level of qualification. Underpinning all of this, as I explained before, there'll be opportunities for continuous professional development and specialist training. Again, this isn't necessarily all stuff that the MYA is going to be writing. We're hoping that other people's training and CPD will be included in that, will be informed by the framework as well. So that's better equipped. Moving on to professionally recognised. We need youth work to be regarded as a key function within local strategy. If we are to generate jobs, generate better contracts, generate better terms and conditions, and to help grow the youth service. We're already doing quite a lot of work in this area. And so I'm going to go through that over the next couple of slides. But the key area, or one of the key areas that I want to talk about first, is the statutory duty. We want to work with the sector to ensure the local authorities keep growing good practice towards meeting the statutory duty and raising the standard of what meeting the statutory duty means. So, just to refresh your memories, the statutory duty has nine areas, the nine key areas that local authorities need to demonstrate that they're meeting. So they need to engage young people. Well, they need to conduct a needs assessment. I'll start over on the left. So they need to be able to demonstrate what the needs of young people are, so that can inform the service development. Young people need to be engaged in the development, delivery, and evaluation of whatever services they're providing, as does the voluntary and community sector. That's really important because, as I was saying, I was talking about the differences in delivery landscape in youth work. And many local authorities don't have their own youth offer. The youth offer is entirely delivered through the voluntary and community sector, which comes with its own opportunities, and there's some very good providers in that sector, but also with its challenges. Because Manchester, where I live, as an example, there's 30 or 40 youth service providers, all working to different funders, all working to different outputs, and coordinating that as a whole youth offer offers a significant challenge. And so local authorities need to engage with that. Workforce planning is in the statutory duty. Local authorities need to ensure that they have a pipeline for a workforce, and we're hoping that this standard qualification framework will support that. They need to ensure they're monitoring, evaluating, and assessing the impact of their work. Safeguarding needs to be key. They need to be working to a youth work curriculum. And the youth offer needs to be part of a local youth offer plan. And ideally, I would suggest that that needs to be working in partnership with allied services. So this is the statutory duty, and I think this is one of the key levers for getting youth work to be professionally recognised as a function and as a practice across local areas in the whole country. So there are a number of other enablers towards professional recognition that I wanted to highlight. And all of these are part of our sort of coordinated approach to the workforce programme in the next 10 years. First thing I wanted to do was to give a shout out to the regional youth work units. You'll have heard me talking across this presentation about the variety in localities and the different delivery landscapes and the different training landscapes. All of the regional youth work units really understand their regions. They make and maintain really effective networks of training providers and delivery organisations. They support delivery organisations with training and events and their own sort of networking. And so plea to all of you, there's a bunch of pleas in this slide, I'm afraid. If you're not already involved in your regional youth work unit and you're not in touch with them, do get in touch and do offer them whatever support you can. They do vary in terms of their function, in terms of their delivery, because they're generated according to local need and local skills and whatever. So it is worth getting in touch and finding out what the local regional youth work is doing and offering them as much support as you can. Other work that we're doing, we do offer support in localities. One of the key ways in which we do that is through peer reviews. So that's a system where we go in and we are a critical friend to services. So we have a look at a youth service, see what its strengths are, identify areas for development, and we do that in partnership with people from other local authorities, so it's fresh eyes on a service. Excuse me. And we celebrate successes through that. That's also giving us really valuable data about, first of all, what local authorities are doing really well, so we can share that good practice, and also about the challenges that different sorts of local authorities are offering. So we're gathering all that data and using it to inform the support we can offer to local authorities across the country. The next thing we're doing is you may be aware that the government is supporting 20 local authorities through youth transformation pilots, and we've been lucky enough to oversee that contract. And so that works closely with local authorities to support them in transforming their youth offer. It's very closely aligned to the themes identified in the statutory duty. And again, that's giving us some really, really useful data and useful learning in terms of what local authorities are doing well and what challenges they're offering in terms of their journey towards meeting the statutory duty, and developing really good, effective youth services. In addition, we're working closely with government. So we're trying to influence, well, we have been trying to influence the development of the new youth strategy. That is a youth strategy. It's not a youth work strategy, but we've been very busy in working with government to try and articulate what trusted adults means, about youth participation, that sort of thing. We're also trying to influence government around the development of youth hubs and family hubs. Um, Also, and this is a key thing that we're developing. You may be familiar with it. We launched the Youth Worker Register a couple of years ago, and we think that in terms of developing professional recognition, the Youth Worker Register could be a really, really useful tool. So we want youth workers to be proud of registering on the Youth Worker Register. We also have a lot of work to do to work out. We're aware of the benefits that it offers in terms of supporting employers with safeguarding and that kind of thing. We want to make sure it offers workers benefits as well. And so that's something we really want to grow over the coming years. And eventually, we do want youth workers to be proud to say that they're registered youth workers. So please, yourselves and your colleagues and your learners, encourage them to register on that. It's only going to get better. And then the final piece of work that's being undertaken that I'm very keen to grow is with allied services. You'll be aware, I'm sure, that the allied sector really values youth work and uses it. Health is one of the biggest growth areas for youth work, as are services and education. And one of the interesting things that I've found doing peer reviews um, is the sort of warm words which I hear from allied services about youth work. And I think there's a real opportunity there for us to carve out some recognition about what youth work does. I'll give you an example, or a couple of examples, both from peer reviews that I've conducted in the last year. In one, the social work team, in the meeting that we had with them, said, "We don't understand how youth workers are able to engage these young people when we can't." And the reason youth workers can engage these people is because that's what youth work does. We work in such a way that, at the pace of young people, where young people are, with young people's needs at the forefront of our minds. That means we're better able to engage with young people. And that function is really useful. And the social workers there found it was incredibly valuable to them in terms of being able to adjust their service to better meet the needs of young people and to make sure that someone was there to walk with young people through their engagement with social services and social care. So keeping young people engaged in those services and informing them. Um, and it was really good. The other thing I heard was teachers saying they couldn't do their jobs without youth workers. And again, it was the same sort of thing. It was youth workers having that deep knowledge and deep relationships with young people and understanding the pressures that young people had, not necessarily just in school, but outside the school gates. But the interesting thing in both of those examples was when I asked the youth workers or the social work team, and the teachers how they quantified that value that youth work brought in terms of improved quality of service or in terms of cost savings, they weren't able to say. That wasn't being measured. So on the one hand, they're saying they weren't able to do their jobs without youth workers, but on the other hand, the degree to which they weren't able to do their jobs without youth workers wasn't something that was being counted. And in terms of recognition, and this is my final plea to you, I think we need to start doing that. We need to start working out what it is youth workers do to improve and to augment the other services and work out how much that saves. Because in terms of recognition of the function of youth work, those things are going to be what matters. So there's a plea. So if you're working with allied services, please do flag those as issues. So moving on. Um, so there you go. We want more youth workers. We want them to be better equipped in terms of the levels of qualification, in terms of the level of training, and we want them to be professionally recognised. And as I said, all of our work over the coming 10 years is going to be geared towards those three categories. That's enough from me.